Kigali is set to host the African Green Revolution Forum Virtual Summit starting next week, running from September 8th to 11th. The conference is the world's premier forum for African agriculture, bringing together stakeholders in the agriculture landscape to deliberate practical actions and share lessons that will move Africa agriculture forward. Earlier today, we spoke to AGNES Kalibata, who is the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for the Food Systems Summit. She's also the president of AGRA, to tell us more about improving Africa's food system and the importance of this summit towards addressing Africa's food security.
First of all, we want to keep the issues that we have at hand in the minds of people. Number one, we need to feed our continent. The challenge of feeding ourselves remains a major challenge. Number two, we are doing this in the midst of a COVID crisis, and the ability to be able to discuss the challenges that the COVID crisis presents, because a lot of people have been affected by the COVID crisis, and the fact that even before the COVID crisis, we were sitting in a food situation that was being really caused by climate change and impacted by climate change. So this is an opportunity for us to talk about what is it that we need to do differently, and how do we make sure that we take advantage of what we have in our hands. What we have in our hands the most are our people, our land, and our ability to produce. And this nobody can take away, not even COVID. So the opportunity this conference offers is that we can actually keep that conversation going and keep people focused on how this sector can keep us growing as a continent.
Mentioning about COVID-19, how has COVID-19 affected Africa's food security, and how is it important this summit towards addressing Africa's food security?
So COVID-19 came in and did impact, hugely, has impacted people in so many ways. The economies of a lot of countries have been significantly impacted. When you look from an agricultural sector perspective, probably the first thing that happened was the fact that markets were impacted. The agricultural sector depends on the functionality of agricultural markets. So the fact that markets were impacted and movement was impacted meant that movement of food and people really became constrained. And the sector that has suffered the most probably is the SME sector, that does business between the farmer and the folk. 90% of the food we eat in Africa actually comes in from our farms and moves through the hands of SMEs. These SMEs have not been functioning well. A few of them have closed. Many of them are struggling. And that has really been part of what COVID has caused. Another thing is just governments finding themselves having to transfer resources to deal with a crisis, to deal with a pandemic from a health perspective, and really, in a way, diverting resources that could be supporting and moving the agricultural sector forward in cases where governments have to prioritize the health sector, which is extremely understandable. The other is the fact that it's impacting governments' abilities to borrow resources to invest. and once that happens, it affects the whole macroeconomic environment of these countries. But from a very practical point of view, what we see in countries where we work, we see that produce in many countries is rotting on farms, where farmers were harvesting during COVID crisis. Post-harvest losses are even higher than ever before. We are lucky in many places. For example, in East Africa, it happened when people were already farming, so food is there. A lot of predictions around food crisis of enormous proportions have not yet come true, because we are lucky that it happened at a time when the seasons were good.
Talking about Africa, despite being considered as a global food basket, Africa remains a relatively hungry continent. What do you think is the problem with Africa's food system?
So I don't agree with the idea that Africa is a hungry continent. I do believe that Africa has done a lot to move away from that perspective of being considered a hungry continent. And in fact, before climate change happened, Africa was on the rise in terms of trying to catch up with lost decades. You know, Africa was doing very well in the 70s and until the 80s, and we were right now on the rise, trying to get there. Then climate change happened around 2010, and between 2010 and 2013, in ways that started taking us backwards. So there's been an erosion of the investments that have been made because of climate change. Now, what we need to do is to recognize that fact, the fact that we are walking up a slope. And we need to then start really ensuring that the investments we are making are commensurate to actually walking up a slope to ensure that we get back on top of things. And there are very good reasons for that. The agricultural sector offers great opportunities for inclusivity, for bringing as many people in the mainstream as possible. The agricultural sector actually offers an opportunity for Africa's macroeconomic picture to work, because then you have spending power. When you look at what these countries are suffering within the West, they are suffering because people are not spending money. So that is where Africa's problem lies. 80% of our people cannot spend money because they don't have money. So we can't grow our economies. The agricultural sector does provide that opportunity so that people can have money, people can have a base. So the more we invest from a public perspective to get this sector off the ground, the more our economies can get to a better place and the more economies can be stronger.
So let's talk about AGRA that you head. What has been your role in streamlining Africa's food system, but ensuring equality in access to food, but also ensuring food security on the continent?
What we do as AGRA is to ensure that these systems function. The systems of ensuring that the technologies out there that can help enhance the agricultural sector, that those systems function in African countries. And that's what we've been doing, investing in research, investing in private sector businesses so that those businesses can take advantage of the outcomes of research, but also investing in public policy so that the policies that are very critical for the private sector that is taking these things to farmers to be in place and to deliver appropriately are in place. So AGRA has focused in those areas especially. Now we also look at state capability. What makes it difficult for governments to put these functional systems in place? We also look at that, and we've been working with we work with 11 countries across the continent, and in those countries we try to support the ability of governments to deliver on some of these things. And just recognizing that there are a few things here and there that don't work the way they should, and ensuring also that the technical capabilities that are required. So
let's zero it down further to your role as UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for the Food Systems Summit. What has been your role in improving a regional food system and fighting hunger on the continent?
My job is to put in place instruments, if you might say, that will help everybody come together to discuss what is broken in our system, why are we moving in the wrong direction, and how might we reverse this. And the idea is to really then come up with new ways of helping countries and governments and private sectors set ambitions as to how we might achieve the SDGs for which we've already signed up to. This is not new negotiated ground. We are not looking to negotiate any new ground, but we do recognize that we are off track on ground we have already negotiated, which is the SDGs. And the only way we can get back on track is if we recommit to, and recommit with significant ambition with regards to new direction that we need to take. So my hope is that as I bring the summit to the world, because we've put a number of summit instruments in place, we have a scientific group that is looking at the science of where we are coming from, but also the science of where we are going. What do we need where we are going? We have country-level dialogues that will happen in every country. We are going to have all sorts of dialogues to ensure that people are engaged. We have action tracks that will be looking at game-changing ideas that can define where we go. So my hope is that as we bring the summit to everybody, as we engage communities, as we engage governments, as we engage private sector, that we actually see the opportunity to reverse the ability for us to achieve the SDGs right now, which is off track, and make sure that in the next 10 years, we can actually impact the SDGs in a meaningful way. So that's the opportunity that the Food Systems Summit offers, and my job is to engage, to find people, work with people, and engage the rest of the world in being part of the Food Systems Summit.
Brilliant. Agnes Kalibata, UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for the Food Systems Summit, and also the President of AGRA. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, and we invite you to be part of the AGRF, which will discuss all these topics that we are talking about here today.
We're looking forward to be part of it. Thank you.